George Burns was the funniest person in America for 80 years. He made a lot of money, more than $30 million. His two adopted kids thought they would get everything. But in March 1996, Burns did something that no one saw coming. He didn't leave anything to his kids in his will. Every dime went to a completely different place. His family was left with nothing but questions. Burns's friends believe he never told anyone about some secrets. He left his kids for a terrible cause that happened years before. Now, George, you got my doctor is dead. George Burns was born on January 20, 1896, in a modest flat at 95 Pittsburgh Street on New York's Lower East Side. Nathan Birnbaum was his name. At that time, life around him was quick and loud. Dora and Louis, his parents, had fled hard times in Ruptica, Galatia, and brought their old world traditions with them to a new world that was too small. He was the 10th of their 12 children. The family had to fit into 3 small rooms, where bodies kept them warm more than blankets. Louis worked as a caner and barely made enough money to support his family. To help out, Dora washed clothes for her neighbors. Most kids on the Lower East Side wore clothes that had been passed down to them and shared mattresses. There were many nights when all we had for dinner was potatoes and onions. Even bread seemed like a gift. George still remembered the jokes in Yiddish, the laughing, and the way life went in those rooms. He kept that joke in mind. In 1904, everything changed. When his father died abruptly at 47, he was only 8 years old. The family had no extra money or savings. He had to help, thus school ended for him after 5th grade. He would shine shoes on street corners for 5 cents a shine. It was cold, nasty, and long, yet he kept going. He sometimes made extra money by singing with a kids group called the Imperial Five. One night, the person who was supposed to promote them took their money and ran away. George had nowhere to go and slept in alleys, where he learned what real hunger and fear felt like. But he acted like those nights were covert training. They trained him how to be tough and how to get around on the street. His sense of self changed as he got older. His family called him Natty. Because of his shine box, other kids called him Shoes Birnbaum. He made cigars. He sold papers. He snuck into burlesque theaters to see performers make people laugh out of thin air. That was the life he wanted. He made a stupid wager when he was a teenager and tried to swim across the East River. He was swept beneath by the current and almost drowned. That event worried him, but it also made him feel alive in a crazy way. He soon tested on different names for the stage. Izzy Burns, George Birnbaum, and the Burns Brothers Coal Company all have something to do with George Burns. He had taken coal from them before to keep his family warm. He even tried identities like Willie Delight and Captain Betts to trick booking agencies and keep working. He wanted to run when he was 14, and he did. He left home in 1910 and joined the Mickey Rooney Stock Company, aiming to become a vocalist. He got paid to perform for the first time at a theater in the Midwest. But he froze, lost all the words, and the crowd booed him till coins fell on the stage. They let him go right away. He claimed that being embarrassed was the best lesson he ever learned, even if it hurt. After that, he traveled over the Midwest singing on ferry boats, in brothels, on street corners, and anywhere else that could give him some money. He didn't eat much some days. He didn't sleep much some nights, but he felt alive and kept going. He was 17 in 1913 and still wanted to go on stage. With his sisters Beatrice and Irene, he started a singing group called the Burning Three. They went on tour to rough vaudeville theaters with tough crowds. Irene fled off with a sailor, leaving George and Beatrice with little money. George begged for money for the train to come home, but he came back to New York with no money and a big ego. He never thought of giving up, though. He learned how to improvise, deal with crooked theater owners who wouldn't pay, and deal with the pain of failure without losing his fire during those years. He sought to join the Navy when World War I broke out, but they turned him down because he was too short. He was 5 feet 7 inches tall, but they wanted males who were taller. He didn't give up, he found another way. He dressed up as a woman named Barbara and snuck onto troop ships with groups of entertainers. It was dangerous. He could have been arrested for one mistake, but he did it. He sang for soldiers who were homesick while hoping he wouldn't be found. He laughed about it later, but at the moment it was only to stay alive. He was saved by reinvention more than once. In 1916, he thought he had finally made it when he worked with dancer Elsie Rain. They made a ballroom act and traveled up and down the East Coast to perform. But Elsie left him for a man with more money, and George was stuck again. He was broke and tired, so he got to work as a soda jerk on the boardwalk in Coney Island. While he served ice cream, he told customers jokes. Some people laughed, and some people left. They all taught him how to time things. He learned how to read people and change his mind right away. He later remarked that this work was better for his career than any producer had ever been. By 1920, he was using the name George Burns full-time and performing alone. He worked at speakeasies during Prohibition, when raids may happen at any time. To avoid getting detected, he had to hide in a coal bin one night. He was covered in black soot and embarrassed as he climbed out, but he also felt strangely empowered. He realized that he needed someone to balance him on stage after these evenings. He needed a partner who could keep up with him. That partner came along in 1923. He met Gracie Allen at a booking agency in Chicago. He was auditioning with dancer Maggie Healy, but he got mad and fired her when she forgot her lines. Later, he ran upon Gracie, a 27-year-old Irish-American entertainer whose family act had broken up. He felt something new around her when they first met. He asked her if she wanted to try his performance. They practiced, and George was going to be the humorous guy while she was going to be the straight man. But everything changed when they got in front of a crowd. People giggled at how confused Gracie was. Everyone looked at her because of her voice, timing, and quick reactions. George saw it right away and adjusted the performance right away. Gracie became the strange character, and he became the patient spectator who allowed her shine. Their first appearance together at the Hill Street Theater in New York showed that the magic was real. People in the audience loved them. Laughter came in waves. The 60-40 routine they did in the morning taught them what worked and what didn't. George remarked that there was a connection between Gracie and the audience that he could never match. They entered the Pantages circuit by 1924 and made hits with their Dizzy and Lamb Chops performances. They made $50 a week, which was enough to buy their first car. It finally seemed like life was opening up. George was scared of anything he didn't like by the end of 1925. Another performer was trying to win Gracie over. He told her she had to make a choice on Christmas Eve. You can either marry him or leave. Gracie agreed, even if it was bold and messy. They got married in Cleveland on January 7, 1926. The event was modest, but it had a big effect. From that point on, their personal and professional lives were intertwined. They signed a 6-year contract with RKO a few weeks later. The contract said that neither of them could work alone. It made them partners for a long time, maybe even decades. The contract promised stability, but life brought new problems. Gracie started to pass out during practice. Later, doctors found out that it was a heart problem that would be with her for the rest of her life. George never thought that someone with so much enthusiasm could be so weak. She kept going with her performances. She worked through pain and tiredness for years, and everyone around her admired her for it. That illness finally made her resign in 1958, and it killed her in 1964. But as they were getting famous, she was the one who kept the show going with a strength that no one in the audience could see. When George Burns and Gracie Allen walked onto the stage of the Palace Theater in New York in 1927, everything changed for them. The Palace was the best place for a vaudeville show to be. They were the main act there and made $1.50 a week. It felt like the ideal they had been chasing for years was finally coming true. The public liked them, especially Gracie's weird logic that didn't make sense but always worked. People said they were like the Marx Brothers, and the laughter from those nights followed them wherever they went. From the outside, their climb looked quick, but behind it were years of hard work, switching roles, and figuring out that Gracie was the real spark that made the room light up with one bewildered question after another. The Palace kept them at the top of their game and pushed them to the next level of their rise. 2 years later, in 1929, they crossed the seas for a 15-week tour of BBC Radio. It was intended to go smoothly, but as soon as they got there, British Customs took George's smokes. He had been smoking since he was 10, but now he had nothing to settle his anxiety. He took his anger and made it into jokes about withdrawal, which he then added to their show. The British audience enjoyed it. Their routine spread over a continent that didn't know them, but they were welcomed by packed radio hours and huge earnings. That tour made them famous over the world and taught them how to turn different rules, cultures, and customs into comedy. By 1931, they were large enough to be in the Ziegfeld Follies, one of the most glamorous performances in America. They were on stage with people like Eddie Kaner. But Gracie was tired from all the traveling. She despised flying, so train rides turned into long trips between cities. She hurt her ankle during one show. The pain was tremendous, but George lifted her up, brought her to the stage, and she kept acting like nothing was wrong. It became another story that they told. Proof of how close they were and how much they cared about the people who occupied every seat. Around that time, George was doing something that not many entertainers would do. He quietly bought repossessed real estate during the 1929 crash with the money he made from vaudeville, while others squandered their money on clothes and luxury hotel rooms. While everyone else was freaking out, he was buying homes for pennies. Those investments helped them stay solvent when the Depression came and cinemas closed. A lot of artists had nothing, but George saw what was about to happen and made sure they wouldn't sink when the industry shook. They made their first movie in 1930 with Paramount shorts like Lamb Chops. But that moment had a twist, too. The reel got stuck during one viewing, and the projector blew up, burning George's eyebrows and filled the room with smoke. Instead of fleeing away, he made fun of the disaster right away, joking about the explosion as if it were part of the plan. The executives were shocked. They had just seen someone change dread into laughing in a matter of seconds. That rapid thinking stuck with individuals and opened more doors than any rehearsed remark could. The George Burns and Gracie Allen show on NBC gave them their big break on the radio on February 15, 1932. Each episode was 15 minutes long and was based on Gracie's crazy misconceptions that somehow fixed everything. By the middle of the 1930s, around 40 million people watched it every week. That number was almost too high to believe, since most shows didn't even get half that many viewers. The style was loose, mostly made up on the spot, and full of surprises. People could hear real laughing, real perplexity, and real sparks between them. In just 1 year, ratings went up from 19.3 to 31.3, an increase of more than 60%. They had proved that radio could work without strict scripts. It just needed two people who were honest, had a good sense of rhythm, and knew how to play off each other. Then, in 1933, Gracie staged a mock presidential campaign as part of a long comic show. She named it the Surprise Party. She traveled to 39 states and even made ballots. Some people really typed her name in during the real election of 1940, which confused local officials until they figured out it was all a joke. She said she would only tax the correct kinds of clouds and that she would award cabinet jobs to friends who wore fine clothes. It was a kangaroo that was the mascot, and the tagline was, "It's in the bag." The campaign raised their radio ratings by over 40% and prompted news organizations wonder how readily politics and entertainment might mix. It was a jest, but it showed what was wrong with the country. People were still surprised by their partnership, even when they weren't in the public eye. George wrote almost all of the scripts, but he always told people that Gracie was the one who came up with the ideas. He wanted the public to notice her talent in a time when males normally got all the praise. In a 1935 episode, Gracie joked that she had forgotten she was married to George. People who liked it assumed it was real. Thousands of letters came in saying that George had been nasty to her. He had to go on the radio to clear things up and state that their marriage was strong. The mistake didn't hurt them, it actually raised their ratings by 20%. People liked that their fiction seemed real. The next great change happened in 1934, when they moved to CBS for $10,000 a week. That payout was crazy because most Americans made less than $2,000 a year. They began to mix real-life situations into their act, notably when Gracie had to have an emergency appendectomy in 1937. They made her surgery a part of the tale and even had genuine physicians on the show. Everyone was interested in the blend of truth and comedy, and it transformed how radio writers told stories. It made the audience feel like they were part of the family and connected to them. By 1938, they were so successful that they acquired a home in Beverly Hills. It should have been a tranquil prize. But one night, George put a lit cigar on a table. The cigar rolled, burnt through cloth, and started a fire that spread faster than anyone thought it would. They almost lost the house. The story was a big hit with newspapers. They didn't hide the horror, instead, they made it into an episode called The House That Burns Built. Gracie blamed herself in the writing and turned the calamity into humor that made people adore them even more. One of the things that made them so charming was that they could laugh at their own blunders. They also had a big chapter in Hollywood. Their major break in movies came in 1932, when their duet Love and Bloom on a big broadcast made them famous across the country. But they kept having problems with censorship. Studio heads decided Gracie's dizzy jokes were too provocative and made him change them. During filming, George would slip the original lines back in his ad-libs. It was a fun act of defiance, but it changed how comics later broke the restrictions of the business. In 1933, Gracie almost got wounded at the International House when the flimsy wire that held up her chandelier stunt broke and plummeted her around 10 feet. George was directly under her and caught her, but he broke 2 ribs in the process. They kept performing and smiling as if the fall was part of the show. The camera operators were stopped, not sure whether to call for rescue or keep filming. That moment made it into the movie, turning a near disaster into a classic comedy. In 1937, they worked with Fred on A Damsel in Distress. Gracie freaked out and missed her dancing steps during a key scene. She yelled out that she was lost in London. A gaze didn't miss a beat. He danced around her confusion and made it into a funny act that made everyone on set laugh. He later said it was pure magic. It illustrated how quick thinking may turn accidents into famous events. During WWAN, they played for soldiers in 1941, which raised everyone's morale. But Gracie got caught up in a weird scandal. During the war, silk stockings were hard to come by, so she snuck a few pairs into the country to give as gifts. The police thought it was illegal. She was almost arrested by a court-martial until George did everything he could to help. After that, the soldiers adored her even more. It turned into one of those secret stories that showed how brave she could be. They were at the top by 1945. Their movie, Two Girls and a Sailor, made more than $4 million. But Gracie's health started to get worse. She had to leave for 6 months because her migraines were so bad. George discreetly started writing the first draft of his memoirs while he was on break. He wanted to keep their story, especially the little things that only they knew. That script turned into Gracie, a love story. It showed how much they loved each other in a way that fans will never forget. On October 12, 1950, something new stealthily made its way into American homes. The first episode of the George Burns and Gracie Allen Show aired on CBS, and no one anticipated that this little sitcom would transform TV. It went live in front of a studio audience, which was dangerous at the time because most shows were still made from old radio shows or taped bits. But when George left a scene and started addressing directly to the audience, people felt like he was right there with them. The show rose quickly. It had 291 episodes and ran until 1958. At its peak, it made them around $200,000 every season. They acted out their lives in a basic household setting, making it seem like the public was peeking into their genuine lives. That decision led to the rise of family sitcoms that defined the 1950s and set the tone for everything that followed after. In November 1951, episode 47 came out. The arrangement was simple and sweet, a surprise birthday party for George that was connected to Gracie's previous campaign events from the 1930s. But the true shock occurred when a fake cake blew up too soon. Frosting flew all over the place. The actors stopped for a moment, then burst out laughing. The producers let it all go live. People at home heard the shock in the studio and loved every second of it. There was no safety net for early TV, and accidents like this one added to its beauty. That tumultuous moment became one of the most talked about scenes of the decade. But the laughter on film disguised a sad secret. George said in the early 1950s that he had a one-night stand while on tour. The guilt made him feel terrible. He purchased Gracie a $10,000 diamond ring and a $750 silver centerpiece to make up for it. She didn't say anything. She never said anything to him. For a long time, people thought they were flawless. His autobiography, which came out years later, was the only place the truth came out. And even that agony made Gracie laugh. She told Mary Livingstone, Jack Benny's wife, that she prayed George would cheat on her again so she could have another centerpiece. There was a hidden world of sorrow, forgiveness, and difficult love underneath the sheen of their TV marriage. Gracie began to lose strength as the decade went on. She had cardiac problems that weren't discovered until the 1950s, even though she had them since she was a youngster. She was too unwell to keep filming by 1957. George told the crowd that she was on vacation, but he kept the reality to himself. She worked through angina migraines and even performed after fracturing her nose, but she couldn't keep going forever. She stopped working in 1958. On August 27, 1964, she died of a heart attack at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles. Her departure ended a chapter in TV history that had a big impact on an entire generation. Jack Benny made a guest appearance on their show in 1956, when it was still on the air. Fans loved seeing two big guys together. But George fell over a cable and broke his hip when he was 60 years old. He wouldn't stop working, so he filmed the rest of the season while sitting down. He made the injury part of his story, and later joked that it was a little price to pay for humor. Even when his bones broke, his spirit never did. He was broken when Gracie died. She died on August 27, 1964, when she was 69 years old. George almost passed out at her funeral. He later remarked that he had only sobbed twice in his life, once for his mother and once for Gracie. He left an empty chair on stage during his live gigs for 2 years following that. He would turn to it, say lines to her, and inform the audience that she was just off stage. People cried with him. He loved her so much that the vacant chair became a symbol of that devotion. But life went on. He tried out a new show called Wendy and Me in 1965. He was a landlord who watched his renters. It didn't land nicely. The show felt empty without Gracie's energy. ABC let it go after just one season. George, who was 69, worried if his career was over. He went back to touring nightclubs, starting over from scratch, and discovered what it was like to work alone after being part of a pair for most of his life. He had had enough by 1967. He was smoking and drinking a lot. He passed out on stage from tiredness while living in Las Vegas. He was informed by doctors that he would not live through the year if he did not stop. He gave up everything in one night. No cigarettes, no booze, no easy way out. He said subsequently that the choice saved his life and was a turning point that kept him going for years. In 1969, he tried again with Christmas specials starring a grandpa. He thought they would help people remember who he was, but admirers kept saying the same thing. They wanted the old jokes. They wanted the cigar. They wanted the beat of Gracie. George knew he needed another foil, so he started working with visitors like Carol Channing. The crowd slowly got warmer again. He slowly found himself. He wrote his book, I Love Her, That's Why, in 1968. Over 100,000 copies were sold. It was funny and honest at the same time, as when Gracie forgot where she parked her car. The triumph paid for his first solo tour. It became his way to start a new career, and for the first time, he was able to speak for himself. Then he got one of the biggest surprises of his life. He played Al Lewis in The Sunshine Boys with Walter Matthau in 1975. The movie came out in December 1975 and got good reviews right away. He won Best Supporting Actor at the 48th Academy Awards on March 29, 1976, when he was 80 years old. He beat out younger talents, such Richard Dreyfuss from Jaws. Hollywood gasped. He became a living legend overnight when he won. He was in the movie Oh God with John Denver the next year. The movie made more than $51 million and was one of the biggest hits of 1977. George spoke with the same gentle bite that made him renowned. He even put a stipulation in his contract that said he may smoke cigars on site. He had been smoking since he was 14 and often smoked 10 to 15 cigars a day. People loved watching a god who made jokes and smoked cigars, and the movie changed how people saw him in his later years. He signed a 5-year contract with Caesars World in Las Vegas in November 1983, when he was 87 years old. He said he will do a special show on his 100th birthday. Executives joked about betting that he wouldn't live that long, but he kept performing sold-out gigs into his 90s. He even made a joke about how Julius owned Caesar's Palace the last time he played there. That pact made him someone who always kept the joke and himself alive. He had triple bypass surgery in 1984 when he was 88 years old. Most individuals would go away for a year. Within months, he was back on the set of Oh God, You Devil, sometimes in a wheelchair. He kept it from the camera and put the same intensity into every line that he had when he was young. Everyone around him was motivated by his determination. He got the Kennedy Center honors in 1988 when he was 92. He sang a duet with B. That night, Midler. He put out Gracie later that year. It was a Grammy-winning album that mixed his voice with old recordings of hers. Fans cried when they heard them together again. He felt like he had reached through time to clasp her hand one more time, but time kept taking its toll. He fell in his Beverly Hills bathtub in July 1994, when he was 98 years old. He hit a soap dish and cut his head terribly. Doctors at Cedars-Sinai observed that he was slurring his words. They did emergency surgery to get the fluid out of his brain. He had to cancel his long-awaited event at Caesar's Palace, which had been sold out for more than a year. After that collapse, his health never fully recovered, and his career as a performer ended after more than 80 years. Even from his hospital bed, he still made people laugh. He made up fresh lines all the time and cracked jokes to friends like Milton Berle to feel alive. He had a tiny private party at home in December 1995 because he was too weak to go to his formal 100th birthday party. He handed out cigars and promised everyone he would see them at 101. He turned 100 years old on January 20, 1996. He died at home on March 9, 1996, following a heart attack. George Burns died in his bed at home in Beverly Hills yesterday morning, less than 2 months after his 100th birthday. The old comedian had been sick for a while, but he had been getting better lately. On October 10, 1996, his estate, which was worth more than $30 million, went up for auction at Sue's in Beverly Hills. There were 266 lots, from scripts to cigars. He gave everything to the Motion Picture Fund, the United Jewish Fund, and Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Sandra and Ronnie didn't get anything. Some were astonished, but those who knew him realized that giving to charity was his last way of giving back. His power never went away. Jerry Seinfeld has mentioned several times that George's book Living It Up changed the way he writes jokes. George's perfect timing, quiet delivery, and straight guy approach are what make up modern humor. His cigars and martinis became symbols, but physicians later indicated that it was his bright mind and large social circle that kept him alive.